Some men are hollowed out by loss. Others are carved into something sharper. Wade Barrett wasn't sure which he was not until that blistering morning on the Texas plains when the scream came slicing through the stillness like a whip crack. It wasn't the cry of a coyote or a spooked mare. No, this was human-piercing, ragged, and full of terror. He turned in the saddle just in time to see her, a small, ghostly figure tearing across the rocky ground in a torn white dress, her pale skin nearly glowing in the sun. Her hair, almost white, fluttered behind her like smoke. She was barefoot, bleeding, and clearly running for her life. Behind her, 4 men on horseback bore down fast, their voices cruel, their eyes locked on their prey. Wade didn't know her name, yet didn't know she was only 13, or that her rare condition, albinism, made her stand out like a beacon. But when she looked up and ran straight toward him, panic etched across her face. Wade knew one thing for sure. Whatever nightmare she was fleeing, he wasn't about to let it catch her. Wade swung down from the saddle in one fluid motion, boots crunching on sun-baked shale as the girl collapsed at his feet. Dust coated her lashes, yet her eyes startling, pale blue locked onto him with a fierceness that startled even a man who'd stared down rustlers and Comanche alike. "Please, sir," she rasped, clinging to his duster with trembling fingers, "don't let him take me back. I can't marry that old buzzard, I just can't." Her voice quivered like a fence wire in a West Texas windstorm. Wade knelt and eased a canteen to her lips. She swallowed greedily, then choked on a sob. Thin arms bore deep purple bruises in the shape of uncaring hands, and her bare feet were sliced open from half a mile of running over caliche and cactus thorns. Between gulps of water she poured out the nightmare. Her uncle, Levi Turner, lost their drought-stricken farm to gambling and whiskey. To wipe the debt, he'd sold Lila, aged 13 years and 2 months, she added with heartbreaking precision, to Harlan Kessler, a land baron old enough to be her great-grandfather. The wedding was set for noon, less than an hour's ride south, at Dry Creek Chapel. Kessler's men, she whispered, called her pale prize stock, a sick joke that made Wade's knuckles tighten around the canteen. For a heartbeat, he heard another voice, his own Emily, gone 3 summers now from scarlet fever, asking if he could fix it, Daddy. Lila's tear-streaked face carried the same fragile hope, the same unspoken question of whether adults ever keep their promises. Something inside him, left for dead beside his daughter's gravesite, surged back to life. Behind them, the riders were closing the distance fast, maybe 200 yards and gaining. "Get behind me," Wade ordered, voice low and even. He lifted her onto his bay mare's saddle, cinched the reins around a weathered hitching knot only he could release with a tug, and planted himself between the child and the oncoming thunder of hooves. The Colt revolver at his hip suddenly felt like thin insurance against 4 rifles, but resolve braced him straighter than any gun belt. Lila clutched the saddle horn, eyes wide. "They'll shoot you, mister." Wade tipped his hat to shade her face. "Not before I give 'em plenty to think about." In the shimmering heat, he could already make out Kessler's sneer and hear the metallic snick of Winchester hammers drawing back. Yet Wade Barrett, a man hollowed by loss and now sharpened by purpose, simply squared his shoulders and waited for sometimes a single stand between right and wrong was all a man had left to give. The 4 riders reined up in a loose half-circle 30 yards away, dust billowing around their horses like smoke from a campfire. Their leader, Harlan Kessler, sat, a massive roan, its saddle trimmed in silver conchos that flashed under the pitiless sun. Kessler's girth strained a brocade vest better suited to a San Antonio parlor than the open range, and when he grinned, a row of gold-capped teeth glittered like coins in a gambler's pot. "Morning, stranger," he drawled, voice oily enough to slick a chuckwagon skillet. "You got something that belongs to me." He jerked his chin toward Lila, still perched on Wade's bay mare. "Hand over the girl, and there'll be no hard feelings." Wade planted his boots shoulder width in the pale dust, thumbs hooked casual-like near the gun belt, but not touching iron. "Don't reckon she looks like property," he said, letting his words float on the hot wind. Behind him he felt Lila tense, heard her breath hitch. Kessler's smile slid into something uglier. "Paperwork says different. Paid $300 and a half section of creek bottom for her fair and square. Preacher's waiting over at Dry Creek, and my men don't ride home empty-handed." One of the riders then as a fence post, eyes cold as January ice-thumbed back the hammer on his Winchester. Another spat a stream of tobacco juice that sizzled in the heat. Wade counted 4 rifles, 2 revolvers, 6 hearts that might stop beating if somebody sneezed wrong. He also noted the way their horses danced, spoiled, high-strung stock, more likely to shy at a sudden noise than stand steady in gunfire. "Contracts can be broken," Wade said evenly, "especially ones signed in fear." He tipped his hat back an inch. "Girl says she ain't willin'. That makes it kidnapping in any court worth the name." Kessler barked a laugh. "Court? Son, the nearest judge is 80 miles east, and he drinks from my bottle. Out here, law rides in the saddle that wins." He leaned forward, vest buttons groaning. "I'll give you one chance. Fork that horse south, leave the girl, and ride on. You do that, I'll forget I saw you. Push me, and we plant you right here. Wrap her up, and make the chapel by noon all the same." For a moment the prairie held its breath. A grasshopper clicked somewhere beneath the sage. Wade felt sweat trickle down his spine, yet his voice stayed calm. "Funny thing, Mr. Kesslerloss can hollow a man or sharpen him. Today you'll find out which one I am." Kessler's eyes narrowed. "Have it your way." He gestured, and the riders began to fan out, boots creaking, rifles leveling. Wade slid a step sideways, forcing them to adjust or risk crossing lines of fire. Every second bought Lila more breathing room, and every heartbeat gave him time to weigh impossible odds. He spoke without turning. "Lila, you hang on tight and lean low." "Yes, sir," she whispered, voice trembling but clear. The rifles steadied. Wade's hand drifted toward his Colt, slow enough to keep nerves taut, fast enough to draw when the first trigger squeezed. The sun beat mercilessly, 100 degrees and climbing. Somewhere far off, a hawk screeched, as if warning the whole wild country that blood might soon stain the dust. In that blistering stillness, Wade Barrett chose his side of the line and waited for hell to break loose. Hoofbeats drummed like war sticks as Wade jerked the bay around, fired a warning shot that made Kessler's roan rear, and bolted south toward the labyrinth of sandstone buttes. Rifle cracks chased them, hot lead humming past Wade's ear, but the bandits hesitated to risk hitting their bride. Within minutes, horse and rider plunged into the first shadowed draw. Safe for the moment beneath overhanging rock, Wade swung down, heart thrashing almost as hard as the mare's lungs. Lila slid off the saddle and sank to her knees, dress torn, knuckles raw. She pressed both palms against the small of her back, shaking in the broiling gloom. Wade handed her the canteen, then crouched beside her, scanning the canyon mouth for silhouettes. "They won't quit," he murmured. "Kessler's the type to hunt till sundown or worse." Lila's thin shoulders rose and fell. "He can't have me," she whispered, voice raw as scraped hide. "Not alive anyway." Wade studied her pale profile, freckles almost invisible, eyelashes so blonde they seemed dusted with flour. "Why you, child? A man like Kessler could buy himself a dozen ranches full of brides. What makes you worth this blood?" She gulped water, wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist, then met his gaze. "Because of what Daddy found and what I know." She pulled a locket from beneath the wedding rags, its hinge battered but still able to snap open. Inside, instead of a picture, lay a minuscule square of oilcloth folded 8 times. She shook it out like a gambler setting aces on the table, a thumb-sized Maptony inked X's, a crooked arroyo, the words Serpent Ridge, penciled in faint cursive. My father, Amos Grace, wasn't just poking around for snakebite weeds, she said, voice steadier now. He was a federal deputy marshal riding under another name. While prospecting as cover, he struck a vein of placer gold out in the Badlands Spur as spring water, thicker'n pie crust. Thought he could use the claim to lure Kessler into the open, prove the land baron was murdering homesteaders. Wade frowned, but the marshal never surfaced with the evidence. Because Kessler's men shot him 2 months ago. Her words came out flat, as if all tears had run dry. Daddy lived long enough to drag himself home and make me memorize every line of that map. Told me if anything happened, I had to keep the place secret till I reached the U.S. court in Fort Worth. He burned the only paper copy the next morning. She touched her albinic brow as though the coordinates were written beneath her skin. Uncle Levi sold me once he realized I carried the location in my head. Kessler figures a marriage license is cheaper than a bullet. Wade folded the oilcloth, slipped it back into the locket, and felt the old ache in his chest harden into iron purpose. Gold stained with good men's blood, he muttered. All right, Lila Gracelets, see if we can turn that ore into Kessler's gravestone. Wade cinched a bandana over Lila's shoulders to keep the fierce July sun from burning skin already as fragile as porcelain. Then he swung her onto the bay again, vaulted up behind, and nudged the mare south into the maze of rust-red mesas. The canyon's mouth funneled wind like a forge bellows. Their sweat dried almost as fast as it formed. Hoofbeats echoed off sandstone walls, multiplying until Wade had no idea whether Kessler's posse was 200 yards or 200 feet behind them. They pounded along a dry wash, mesquite claws raking Wade's coat. At a fork, he jerked the reins right, then flung his bowie knife into an ancient cottonwood root to mark false tracks, a trick he'd learned trailing rustlers on the Llano years ago. Hang tight, he told Lila over the wind. If the horse stumbles, lean with her, not against. The girl nodded, jaw clenched in pain. Her bare feet, cracked and bloody, left smears on the stirrup leather. Wade's chest tightened. No child should know agony like that. At a narrow slot no wider than a wagon tongue, he slid off, led the mare single file while Lila gripped the saddle horn. They splashed through a knee-deep spring, masking scent and tracks, then scrambled up scree to an abandoned prospect road. High above, a vulture circled, patient as time. 2 miles on, heat shimmer gave way to cooler air leaking from a yawning mine in trance timbers gray with age. The sign reading Rattlesnake No. 3 Copper Company closed 1,881. Wade hesitated. Old mines were death traps, cave, inns, bad air, shafts like open graves. Still, the shadows offered cover and a chance to break Kessler's line of sight. He lifted Lila down, her legs buckled. Gently, he hoisted her couldn't have weighed more than 80 pound sand ducked under the sagging header. The mine swallowed them in an instant, torch dark and smelling of damp earth and rusted ore. Easy breaths, Wade whispered. Air's thin. He eased her onto a heap of tailings, struck a lucifer match, and lit a sliver of pine pitch pulled from his saddlebag. Smoky flame danced over rock walls scarred by ancient picks. A shuffling sound echoed deeper inside. Wade's hand dropped to his Colt. Who's there? A voice, low and weary, answered in accented English. A friend, if you aim at Kessler's heart. Out of the gloom stepped Tomas Rivera, a wiry man in his late 60s, silver hair tied back with rawhide. His left eye was clouded white, but the right burned with iron resolve. He held a Henry rifle muzzle down in a show of peace. I know you, Wade muttered. Worked the silver pits near Eagle Pass. Rivera gave a brief nod, until your land baron closed the shafts and paid the sheriff to look away. He knelt beside Lila, his weathered hand gentle on her ankle. Kessler took my granddaughter, Rosa. 14. We found her body last spring in the Pecos. His voice cracked, yet his grip on the rifle never faltered. I followed his trail ever since waiting. Lila's eyes glistened in the torchlight. He'll kill us all for what we know. Not if we do it first, Rivera said quietly. These tunnels run for 3 miles, connect to an Apache passage that exits near Devil's Ridge. I can guide you. Past the ridge is an arroyo no horse can enter from the north. Kessler's riders won't think to circle that far. Wade studied the old miner saw grief, hammered into steel. He looked at Lila's ruined feet, at the trembling resilience in her albinic gaze, and made his decision. All right, Senor Rivera, you lead, but once we're clear, I'm done running. I'm taking this fight to Kessler's doorstep. Rivera's lone good eye glinted. Then we share a purpose, amigo. Outside, distant gunshots ricocheted off canyon wall searchers firing at phantoms. Wade doused the pine pitch, plunged them into darkness, and followed Rivera deeper underground, pinning every hope on a stranger's memory and a child's unbreakable will. The deeper they trudged, the lower the ceiling sagged, until Wade had to stoop and Rivera's lantern brushed crumbling timbers overhead. The air turned chill, maybe 55-degree Fahrenheit, carried a sour tang. Wade remembered from battlefield hospitals, old blood and damp earth. Lila shivered in his arms, her battered feet now wrapped in strips torn from Wade's shirt. Every dozen yards he felt a warm bead of her blood seep through the fabric. They needed daylight and a doctor, yet Rivera pressed on with grim purpose. Listen close, Barrett, the old miner murmured, voice echoing off quartz-veined walls. Gold ain't the only secret hid under this desert. Kessler's men been dumping evidence down here for years. He lifted the lantern toward a blasted side drift. Rot-eaten boards blocked the entrance, but something pale glimmered between them. Wade kicked a plank aside and froze. A child's lacy shoe, size no bigger than Lila's, lay half buried in silt. Beyond it, 6 charred stakes jutted like blackened teeth. Rivera swallowed hard. I found 3 shafts like this. Bodies, 2, sometimes 3 deep, all girls. He pointed to a tarnished brooch on the shoe strap. That's Rosa's. The miner's voice cracked, but he forced himself steady. Federal marshals got wind months ago. One rode in undercover Amos Grace. Lila lifted her head, silver blonde lashes trembling. Daddy. See, Nina. He posed as a prospector, charted these graves, planned to ride north and bring a circuit judge. Kessler ambushed him before he could leave. Rivera eased the shoe free, wrapped it in his kerchief, then faced Wade. Your map doesn't mark gold alone, amigo. It marks death-proof enough to hang that devil twice. Wade's jaw tightened, and Kessler figures a church wedding buries the last witness. He looked down at Lila, her skin nearly translucent in the lantern glow, lips bloodless but eyes fierce. She tried to stand, swayed, and clutched his coat. Can't let Daddy die for nothing, she whispered. Rivera swung the lantern ahead. Tunnel bends left in 50 feet. After that, fresh air comes in through an Apache vent shaft. We'll set bone and stitch what we can, then push for Devil's Ridge. From there, it's 18 miles of badland to Fort Concho. If we ride hard through the night, marshals can be saddled by sunrise. A distant metallic clang rang through the passage pick against stone. Wade scooped Lila up, pulse raging in his temples. Then we'd better hurry. Those grave diggers just found the front door. As they plunged deeper into the black, Wade vowed that every mile, every drop of the girl's precious blood would be repaid in full interest, compounded in gunpowder and rope. They reached the vent shaft just after nightfall, its opening no wider than a saddlebag, and hidden behind thorny scrub. Cool air rushed up from the depths, carrying away the stink of rot and lamp oil. Wade laid Lila on a flat slab of limestone, trimmed a splint from a mesquite branch, and wrapped her swollen ankle tight with strips of his undershirt. Rivera boiled creek water in a tin cup, scalded a needle against the flame, and stitched the worst gash on her foot 6 neat loops of black thread. Lila bit down on a folded bandana and never made a sound. When the stars finally pricked the velvet sky, Rivera unrolled a tattered map of the territory, weighted at the corners with cartridges. He tapped a calloused finger on a square labeled Kessler Ranch House, a cluster of buildings 20 miles north, beyond a dry river that locals called Snake Gulch. That's where he keeps the girls until they break. My Rosa was held there. Word is, another child your cousin, Clarabella's, been locked inside for weeks. Lila's breath hitched. Clarabelle's only 16. She closed her pale eyes, then opened them with fierce resolve. We have to get her out. Wade shifted his weight, the campfire painting his weather-lined face amber and coal. We ride in blasting. We'll lose her and the proof both. Lila pulled the little derringer from a pocket inside her ragged dress. Then use me. Kessler wants me alive. If he thinks you're bringing me back, he'll open the gates. Wade's jaw flexed. The notion of handing this bruised, chilled albinism and all back to the men who'd beaten her made his stomach lurch. Yet he measured the odds. 4 guards on the gate, maybe a dozen more in the bunkhouse, and Kessler himself. Rivera's Henry and Wade's Colt wouldn't last 10 seconds against that many Winchesters. Fake shackles, Rivera suggested softly. Rope her wrists loose enough to slip. They'll search us, but won't look too hard if they think she's half broken. Lila caught Wade's hand. Even with lantern light swimming in her eyes, he saw the same trust Emily once placed in him, trust he'd buried with his daughter 3 winters ago. He inhaled, smelled sagebrush and mesquite smoke, and nodded. All right, we try it your way, but the second I sense a double cross. Then we burn the ranch to the ground. Lila finished, voice steady as bedrock. They rode through Snake Gulch the following dusk, a pale sliver of moon barely lighting their path. Lila sat in front of Wade, wrists bound with rawhide that could be flicked loose by a twist. Rivera trailed 50 yards back, ready to circle and cut the power to the stockade lanterns once the gates opened. At Kessler's main entrance, 2 guards lounged with rifles across their knees. One yawned. The other peered at Wade's dusty hat and the limp figure in his arms. Look what the cat dragged back, he snorted, swinging the gates wide without a second thought. They dismounted in a torchlit yard that stank of sour hay and sweat. Kessler's 4-mana scar-cheeked brute named Galt strode up, boots crunching gravel. Boss'll be pleased. He motioned 2 men forward to take Lila. Wade tensed as rough hands jerked the girl by the shoulders. She stumbled, keeping her head bowed, hiding the tiny pistol now tucked in her sleeve. Galt squinted at Wade. Heard you shot up 4 of ours in the canyon. Got sand, stranger. He jerked a thumb toward the main house. Boss wants a word. They were halfway to the porch when the front door swung open and a young woman stepped out. Candlelight haloed her auburn hair, silk skirts whispered across the boards. Lila lifted her gaze, then froze. Clarabelle, she breathed. Relief sprang across her face until she saw the sly smile curving her cousin's lips. Well, well, Clarabelle drawled, eyes glinting like polished brass. Thought you'd slip away forever, Snow Girl? Father placed a mighty price on that pale hide of yours, and now you're right where you belong. The yard erupted with rifle clicks. Rivera, still outside the gate, dove for shadow as a dozen hidden gun barrels leveled at Wade's chest. The trap had shut, perfect as a spring bear snarend. The bait was a girl who'd just discovered that the only family she could still trust was the stranger standing beside her. Clarabelle's taunt drifted on the night errand. Wade moved. He clamped one hand over Lila's rawhide bonds, yanking them free, while his other hand swept the Colt from its holster in a single, practiced blur. A shouted order from Galt cracked the silence, but Wade's first shot shattered the lantern over the porch, plunging the yard into shadow. Muzzle flashes erupted like summer lightning. Lila ducked, rolled, and came up on one knee with the pearl-handled derringer steady in both hands. She fired point-blank into Galt's thigh. The brute screamed and dropped, rifle skittering across the gravel. Chaos exploded. Horses in the adjacent corral reared at the gunfire, hooves pounding planks like thunder drums. Rivera, waiting beyond the gate, severed the kerosene line feeding the yard torches and sparked it with a match. Blue flame roared up the fence rail, casting flickering light but blinding the riflemen who'd counted on steady lamps. Wade used the confusion, pivoting left to right with sure, deliberate shot-stew rounds into the gate lookout, one into a rooftop sniper foolish enough to silhouette himself against the crescent moon. Clarabelle shrieked and bolted for the house. Lila, ankle-throbbing, lurched after her. "No more cages," she hissed, catching her cousin just inside the foyer. Clarabelle swung a daguerreau-type frame like a club, but Lila punched her square in the jaw-small fist, powered by months of terror and a lifetime's worth of fury. Clarabelle crumpled, skirts pooling like spilled cream. Wade burst through the door a breath later, grabbed Lila's hand, and dragged her toward the study where Rivera had said Kessler kept his ledgers. But Harlan Kessler himself was already there, feet braced, double-barreled shotgun aimed dead center at Wade's chest. The gold-capped smile was gone. In its place glinted pure hatred. "You just signed your death warrant, cowboy?" he snarled. "Funny," Wade said, thumb easing back his hammer. "Thought I was signing yours." He flicked his gaze to a crystal decanter of rye on the credenza. Lila followed the glance, seized the bottle, and hurled it. The shotgun roared as glass and grain alcohol exploded midair, spraying burning powder back into Kessler's eyes. His scream drowned beneath Wade's final show-tone clean round that drove the land baron backward into his mahogany desk, lifeless before he hit the floor. Outside, Rivera whooped as the bunkhouse went oop extra torches he'd tossed through open windows igniting straw mattresses. The remaining gunmen broke, racing for the north pasture. Wade holstered the Colt, scooped Lila into his arms, and sprinted through the smoke. They vaulted the corral gate, mounted the closest horse, and pounded west toward the open desert behind them. Kessler's empire crackled in the flames, and ahead, the first hint of dawn promised that, for once, a new day might actually mean a new beginning. Dawn found them hidden in a box canyon 10 miles west of the burning ranch, the jagged walls painted pale rose by first light. Wade crouched over a small, smokeless fire, brewing coffee strong enough to peel paint, while Rivera stood watch at the narrow entrance, Henry rifle across his chest. Lila sat propped against Wade's saddle, her splinted ankle resting on a folded blanket. Soot streaked her white blonde hair, and her dress smelled of kerosene, yet her gaze remained unbroken steel. "Tell me straight, kid," Wade said, handing her a tin cup half filled with scalding coffee and condensed milk. Why'd Clarabelle smile like the devil knew her name? Lila wrapped both hands around the cup, letting the heat seep into bloodless fingers. "Because she is the devil's daughter," she whispered. "Clarabelle isn't my cousin at all. She's Kessler's own flesh and blood." He kept her secret, even from his men, trained her to spy on every girl he bought, to find out who might run and who knew too much. She was his eyes on the inside. Rivera turned, one clouded eye narrowing. That explains how he stayed ahead of the marshals. A girl among girls raises no suspicion. Wade's jaw set. And she knew about the graves? About the gold vein everything? Lila nodded. "She told me in the bunkhouse, back when I still thought she was family. Said the federal marshal me father made copies of the burial map." Clarabelle searched every pocket of every prisoner, until she was sure none of us carried paper. Then she listened when we cried ourselves to sleep. That's how Kessler knew I memorized the map. Her voice quavered but did not break. Clarabelle whispered that once I was married and quieted, the last witness would be gone. Rivera spat into the dust. Yet she wagged her tongue the moment you escaped, bringing Kessler down on us. It gets worse, Lila said, setting the cup aside. Before the fire, Clarabelle bragged that Kessler had a second Stockadean old stage station, turned holding pen 50 miles south near Devil's Table. 5, maybe 6 girls are locked there right now, waiting on buyers from Mexico City. She said they'd be moved across the border in 3 days once the trail cooled. Wade felt the information strike like a hammer. His entire body ached from the night's battle, and the Colt cylinder was nearly empty, but exhaustion couldn't drown the fury rising in his chest. 3 days, he repeated. That means we ride tonight. Rivera knelt beside Lila. You cannot go with us, Nina. Your wound. She shook her head, pale lashes damp with stubborn tears. Those girls are living my nightmare. I won't sit out their rescue. She reached into the torn lining of her dress, produced the miniature oilcloth Wade had seen the day before, and unfolded it with shaking care. Daddy's map marks that stage station 2, called it Station 2. We have proof now, enough to bring the whole ring down if we keep breathing long enough to hand it to Judge Baylor in Fort Concho. Wade took the map gently, eyes scanning the faded ink. A straight trail south, a dry waterhole, a bluff, shaped like a Boot Hill mile markers etched into his brain. He pressed the cloth back into Lila's palm. Then we breathed together, all the way. Rivera'll fetch fresh mounts from a line shack he knows near Big Bend. We'll rest till sundown, ride under starlight, and hit Station 2 before they ever load a wagon. Rivera's good eye gleamed. 6 girls against 3 guns is still bad odds, amigo. True, Wade said, stooping to stoke the tiny fire. But bad odds are all the frontier ever gives decent folk. Long as one of us carries this evidence and that child's courage, the scales tip our way. He glanced at Lila. You ready? She tightened the rawhide sling around her derringer and gave a ghost of a smile. Born ready, Mr. Barrett. This time, we finish what my daddy started. After 3 nights and 120 dusty miles, Wade Barrett rode into Fort Concho with Lila Grace holding the evidence like a Bible pressed to her heart. By sundown, federal marshals fanned across the desert, raided Station 2, and freed every last captive Essex frightened girls who thought the world had forgotten them. Behind iron bars, Clarabelle finally faced the truth her father never taught her. Real power is measured in mercy, not fear. As for Wade, the widowed cowboy who once believed God had taken everything worth living for, he found a new dawn in the fragile smile of a 13-year-old child with alabaster skin and a spirit tougher than boot leather. He signed testimony, tipped his hat to the grateful families, and rode north with Lila to a doctor in Abilene because promises, like trail markers, must be kept 1 mile at a time. Here's the lesson those windswept days carve into any soul willing to listen. Heartbreak may hollow a person, but stepping up for someone weaker can refill that empty space with purpose. At 60, 70, or 90, we can still choose to be the steady hand that lifts a neighbor, the voice that says enough when wrong men ride tall. You don't need a Colt on your hip or a badge on your chest only, the courage to answer another human being's plea, just as Wade did when a terrified girl grabbed his stirrup. Because in the tally of a life well lived, the measure isn't the acres you fence or the gold you hide. It's the lives you touch before the sun finally sets. If this story stirred something in you, maybe a memory, maybe a spark share, your thoughts below. Tell us about a time you chose to stand up, or wish you had. Your wisdom keeps this campfire burning bright. And if you'd like more tales that honor grit, grace, and second chances, hit subscribe and ring that bell so you're saddled up for every new ride. Your support helps us keep the stories and the hope alive.